I was sharing in the last hour of the show a poll that says 67% of Americans say the Democrats are out of touch with the real needs of Americans. And I don't think this is any shock for anyone who's listening. And I know that a couple of weeks ago we had Matt Erpelding on the air with us, and he's the Democrat who's the House Minority Leader here in Idaho. And he was saying that he feels the National Party has given a black eye to Democrats, especially in flyover country. And if you notice, during this last legislative session in Boise, they didn't debate a lot of the so-called social issues. It's a non-starter in Idaho, and that's, I think, part of the realization among Democrats is they used to have a party that addressed the concerns of working Americans. Bernie Sanders, we played a clip with him in the last hour saying the same thing. And no longer do they do that. They cater to coastal elites, and especially big Wall Street money. And so to call yourself the party of the little guy doesn't work any longer. And then Tom Perez, who's the new chairman of the Democrat National Committee, we mentioned he's going around the House cussing and around the country, going around the country cussing and swearing as he's giving speeches. And Democrats are now defending him, saying, well, we need to address working Americans that way. That's the way they like to be talked to. Which shows you again they're really out of touch with middle America, because I don't think most of us like to be talked to that way. We may use some of that language from time to time. And I pointed out when Donald Trump uses it, he's crass and a bad dude. When a Democrat uses it, it's like, wow, they're just trying to connect with the working men and women of America. As if you're all potty mouths. And then Perez said that any Democrat who's running for public office should step out of the way if they're pro-life. In other words, if you don't support infanticide, the Democrat Party doesn't want you. I've got news for you. My dad was a Democrat. When I was a young man, he was one of the local union leaders in Western New York State at the time. And he strongly identified with the Democrats because they were viewed as the party of the working man, and you might even say working women if you're politically correct. I think you get the idea. But my dad was extremely pro-life. And my dad was among those Democrats who ended up voting for Ronald Reagan not once but twice, because they felt, as Ronald Reagan did, that the Democrat Party had left them and not the other way around. And I share that with you this morning. Peggy Noonan, the former Reagan speechwriter, was appearing yesterday on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. And she brought up the fact that Democrats are simply reducing the numbers of people who can actually vote for them. And so matters aren't going to get any better if you're the leader of the Democrat Party.
Abortion or health services, women's health services, however you put it, they give a lot of money to the Democratic Party. Democratic Party should say thank you very much, but you know what? We're going back to be a big tent party. Broad on social issues like this, we are declaring, go with your heart. If you truly feel that you can be, that you are pro-life and you want to be pro-life and a Democrat, go for it. The Democratic Party has, I think, been hurt very badly in terms of its national reputation with this narrow sort of, you can't be in our party if you don't hold the right views on abortion. It would be a brilliant political move if they opened up.
But they won't, because then they wouldn't get all of the elite money from Hollywood and from Manhattan. And without that, well, then they have to go back and try to work the streets and just do basic appeals to regular Americans. And that poll that said that they're viewed by more than 2/3 of the country as being out of touch with the basic needs of Americans, Detroit News columnist Noah Finley, he says the debt is the real Trump budget cruelty. And he's responding to liberals out there who say we should keep spending and throwing money at every problem in America. And he's being sarcastic when he writes, taking a mere $54 billion out of a nearly $3.8 trillion federal spending plan will ruin the environment, starve the poor, doom the elderly, and create general suffering throughout the land. Meanwhile, he writes, the national debt clock keeps ticking toward the $20 trillion hour, a milestone it should pass in the next few days. The individual share of that obligation for every citizen is $61,200, and for every person who actually pays federal taxes, it's $165,653. Maybe walking around the country saying you grown men need to use the little girl's lavatory. Maybe that's not appealing to the public when the public may be even more concerned about national survival. 9/11, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. A telephone number to reach our program, 736-0300. We have a caller with us. Caller, you're on the air.
Well, if you are a Democrat, today's Democrat, there's no way you can allow people that are pro-life in, because at this point, after 8 years of Obama, these people thought they were in the clear. They had cleared the field, and through any means necessary, and they were skating towards victory to get America fundamentally changed, just like Obama said. And the shock, they're still in denial. And so there's no way. It's just like yesterday there was on one of all the news programs said that Trump's approval ratings were going down and were low. And a commentator said, well, these are the same polls that said Trump wasn't going to win.
Right.
The people that voted for Trump are in his camp, and I believe that he is doing his best, and people know it. So they're, I think the ranks that have faith in Trump are growing. I'll hang up. Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thank you. Well, again, media doesn't realize, because it plays for the other side, it's essentially just the propaganda wing of the Democrat National Committee. Media tried to create the image that there's this huge groundswell, the resistance against Donald Trump. Media went out and they followed around all of these women who dressed up as body parts, personal body parts, and had a big march in Washington. You think most America looked at that and went, wow, gosh, I'd like to go dress as a sex organ myself and march around and protest Trump? Or did they say, look at those freaks? They said, look at those freaks. You got a guy out who still hasn't gotten his job back mining coal in West Virginia, and he's looking at that. What do you think he has going through his head? Or if you have a Christian minister in Nebraska, out in rural Nebraska, what do you think they look at and see with that? How about a police officer in New York City? All over the country, you've got people who realize we've got some real serious crises that we've got to handle, and these people are running around dressed up in offensive Halloween costumes. And this is supposed to represent modern America and the right way of thinking? And media can't help itself. Eric Erickson has a commentary at The Resurgent today where he says the New York Times is trying to claim that Donald Trump's strike against Syria and then dropping the Moab, the big bomb in Afghanistan, was unprecedented in an attempt to try to show off that he was a tough guy. And has never happened before in history. Erickson walks you back through ancient Greek history, down through Roman history, and then down through European history and in Asian history, and shows you examples, and even talks about the Doolittle raid. Again, it didn't win the war, but it was done to strike a blow, a psychological blow. And he points out media is ignoring a couple of thousand years, several thousand years of history because it doesn't like Trump and it doesn't want you to. And it thinks that everybody out there wants to walk around dressed as a human sex organ. Or go if you're a man, you want to go use the ladies' room. I was up at Lucky Peak State Park the other day, and I walked up to the bathroom. I'd been driving since Twin Falls, and there was a sign outside that said the men's room was closed, and I asked one of the park workers if there was another bathroom nearby, and he said, oh, well, the women's room is cleaned. If you want to go in there, I don't think anybody's... No, thank you. No, thank you. Turned out they were actually just cleaning out the restrooms. They were open, so I waited for another minute. I could get inside. I wanted to make a joke, but then I thought maybe he's politically correct with his offer to let me use the ladies' room. And if I do that and he doesn't like it, you never know. He's a government worker. 9:16, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Lefty just continues to believe that everybody else out there either is a lefty or wants to be one. And if you don't want to be one, you're an idiot. And this is the approach they take. And our previous caller said something I thought that was fascinating. They thought they'd cleared the field. They thought over the last 8 years they'd won something, that they had transformed America and that America would never return to its traditional culture. They never realized during the whole 8 years of Barack Obama that Republicans were winning nearly every available seat at the city and town level, at the county level, and at the state legislative level. And that just thousands and thousands of Democratic office holders just vanished. In other words, they got defeated. There was a comment the other day from a leading Democrat who said Barack Obama remains the leader of the Democrat Party, the titular head now, if you will, as the former president. And some people criticize that. I think it's absolutely true. They developed a cult of personality around this man, and he allowed that development, and it snuffed out all of the young people in the party who are up and coming. And the only people they have left, they've got a socialist who claims he's not even a member of the party, and he's trying to win leadership of the party. Or you've got Clinton Jr., you've got the daughter. People who are promoting her to take over the party. In other words, as if somehow it's like the Kim dynasty in North Korea. We'll just hand it off to the next person in line in the family. That's the best they can do? And then they tell you, well, we're a welcoming community, and, we need to allow the grubby 35-year-old men in the little girls' room, and you're a hater if you don't allow it, and $20 trillion in debt. The roads that I was driving over the weekend are falling apart. Bad enough to drive on some of the local streets and some of the secondary highways and have to dodge the moon-sized craters. But when you're out on the interstate and you're driving along and you keep thinking you've got a flat tire while you don't, and yet, but we need to focus on the fact that we need to bring all of Syria to live here, and maybe they'll like to go use the little girls' rooms too. And then they defend genital mutilation. For crying out loud, we're dealing with people here who are frankly insane. They have taken over the asylum, or they did for a while, and then they said, well, wait a minute, the sky is now the sea, and the sea is now the sky, and you're going to follow along, and if you don't, we're going to make sure you never work again, or that you are silenced. Well, I think they dropped the ball. And the thing is, I guess probably it's good for the rest of us. They haven't yet caught on to the fact that the majority realized they dropped the ball. So the more that they continue to wander around, scratch their heads, and say that everyone else just must be a dummy, or they listen to too much talk radio, maybe we need to keep them in that state, that allow them to continue to think that's true, and eventually when there are none of them left in elective office, the field will be cleared. Short break. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. As I mentioned, in the next half hour, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of those weekend science marches and energy and environmental issues. Caller brought that up, pointing out that the drought has officially ended in California. They had a normal winter last year. They were going to, the liberals would have us close every factory in the world and starve 6 of 7 billion people around the planet. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, sorry. I was listening to one fellow traveler over the weekend, and he literally came out in support of one of America's, again, I don't know that I'd always call Ann Coulter a conservative. I'd call her a nationalist. But she got a vote of support from, she's a frequent guest on his program, from the comedian, as they call him, Bill Maher. I want to get to that in a moment. But first, I want to thank you for listening this morning and every morning. But if you struggle with hearing, you need to give the folks at Mount Harrison Audiology a call and get in touch with Dr. Christine Pickup. A lot of people would ask, well, why would I be driving all the way out to Rupert to visit? I'll tell you why. Independence. Mount Harrison Audiology is the only independent, locally owned hearing health care practice here in southern Idaho, which means more choices for treatment than just one brand and lower costs. Trust your hearing to a certified audiologist. Call Mount Harrison Audiology for your appointment today. The telephone number, 208-312-0957. That's 312-0957. We're at 924. Bill Colley with you on Top Story today on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The weather is absolutely abysmal. I think most of you have recognize that. It's going to be that way for most of the week, and who knows? It may continue like this all the way through Halloween, and then it'll just start snowing all over again. We'll talk a little bit more about that so-called climate change in a few minutes. But first, I wanted to share this. Bill Maher on HBO, and he's talking about the effort of liberals to shut down people they don't like when it comes to speaking, for instance, at a college campus. Berkeley, California. He's referring to the University of California at Berkeley, which has sort of bungled this in its attempt to stop Ann Coulter from speaking. They've now said it's okay, but she has to come on a day of the college administration's choosing.
And I feel like, this goes on all over the country on campuses. They invite someone to speak who's not exactly what liberals want to hear, and they want to shut her down. I feel like this is the liberals' version of book burning.
Yeah.
And it's got to stop. Howard Dean tweeted today about this. Hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment. Yes, it is. Threats are not protected by the First Amendment. This is why the Supreme Court said the Nazis could march in Skokie. They're a hateful bunch. But that's what the First Amendment means. It doesn't mean just shut up and agree with me.
There you go. And that's coming from one of the leading lights on the left. Maybe a dim light, but still, you get the idea. 926. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. At newsradio1310.com. Telephone number for reaching our show today, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. You can email me as well at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. I was thinking about all of this in light of the fact that Randy Staples was talking in the last half hour about the town hall meeting in Meridian that Congressman Raul Labrador held. You had a big crowd show up, and they weren't very nice. But Labrador, and Randy pointed out, was very patient, and he listened to everyone's comments. He took 3 hours on stage going back and forth with these people because he realizes even though they disagree, he's going to give them an opportunity to disagree. We have a caller joining us. I wanted to mention again, of course, 736-0300. Caller, you're on the air. Hello? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you go. He got out before even we got to 1. Do a little bit of a countdown there. Ignition sequences, all engines running. You have to be really old to understand that reference. I understand that too. I just, it goes back to a certain period of my childhood. It's 9:27 right now. We have lost, I think, all ability, at least among some corners of America, to understand what the country is really all about, because we don't have civics education any longer. I was reading a story out of, I think it's Morgan County, Colorado yesterday, and the people who are working on the farms there and in some of the agriculture-related businesses, canning and the like, a lot of them are people who are here from other countries. We know how that works in agriculture, but the story was detailing how they all have an abiding interest in the they're taking courses in the Constitution and the history of this country. Why? Because they would like to become Americans, but be good Americans. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley.
Bill, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think it's just ironic. We as Americans don't always agree. I mean, I don't agree with 100% of what you say. You probably don't agree with 100% of what I think, and so on and so forth. But with the liberals, it's either my way or the highway. And I think that's why nothing gets done. We look at the bickering going on in the Republican Party. That's because there's different points of view, and they're going to have to come through a middle ground, which is what our founding fathers wanted. They wanted things to slow down. They wanted people to get together and find middle ground, not one way or the other. Nor do I want to see our government turn into one party, because that would be a disaster in itself, because as soon as one party has all power, everything swings radically one way, as we've just seen in the last 8 years. So, it's just ironic that this is all happening the way it's happening, but yet people still won't open their eyes and see what's going on.
Well, and I thank you for the call. I had a politician actually tell me one time, he serves in elective office, But the founding fathers, we keep hearing, oh, gridlock. He said they wanted a lot of gridlock. They set up a system, they put a constitutional framework in place, and then they figured, hey, if it doesn't work, in a rapid fashion, if it's glacial pace, then it doesn't threaten our constitutional framework. It's 9:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Science March over the weekend across the country. They had a crowd in Boise. Some people say was huge. I happened to see it. It wasn't. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of those issues coming up in the next half hour on Top Story.